Okay, good morning, Erev Yom Kippur. Small group today. I didn't expect the Israeli crew because it's going right into Kol Nidra soon over there. In any case, the 9th of Tishrei, couple of halachas, kaporas, right? Last night, you say the expression b'nei Adam until l'sholom. You say that 3 times. Oh, we do have Israel here. I expected that you guys would be rushing into
Exactly. I'm just
Nidra,
here to say Gemar Chatima Tova.
Gemar Chatima Tova.
Mimcha at the Rashbi. I'm off. All right.
Okay.
All the best. Sorry I miss you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So B'nai Adam is said 3 times. As you rotate the fowl, I like that. As you surround your head with the chicken, 3 times around the head at each reading, a total of 9 rotations. Until the end of Tishrei, no tachonin is said. That's nice. And Erev Yom Kippur, we give Malchus, which is the symbolic beating on the back. The one administering and the one receiving the flogging together recite that whole pasuk 3 times, not pasuk, that whole litany 3 times. Now, this is the order of the day coming up. On Erev Yom Kippur, today, the avodah is remorse for the past. On Yom Kippur, it's resolve for the future. Right. That's how Yom Yom. And today, as always, before Shabbos, before Yom Tov, we'll do today, and we'll do Yom Kippur, Yom Tov as well. Lessons in Tanya. Bottom of page 386. And in Likuti Amorim, it's in the middle of page Kuf Lamed Aleph. Okay, it begins, Ubezeh Yuven. With this will be understood. I'm not going to recapitulate what we've said before, but I'll just give the mashal that I used the last time from the Rebbe Rashav about the point, the line, and the plane, the area. Atzmus is a point. It contains everything in a state of, if you can get this, non-existence. An existence, and that's the language. In Chassidus, Matzias she'ein by Matzias, an existence which has no existence. Everything is in it, but not yet existence-ized. It's not yet really, it's not yet in any way visible. And the mashal for this point is like the seminal drop, or the Alter Rebbe says on the other day, the egg, the child as it exists in the mind of the father and the mother. No child yet, but there's something there which is going to drive that externalization, that materialization. That's the point, the yud. And that expands into the line, which is in Hasidic language called the kav, a beam of light which carries Ein Sof with it. Starts before the tzimtzum and passes through the tzimtzum and is responsible ultimately for the materialization, instantiation, existence of everything. And finally, the last is the shetach, which is the area where area now begins to take on dimensionality. The point is something of 0 dimension. The line is a dimension of linear only, without any width. And the area is length and width, which is the hay, and in this case, the second letter hay, the hay which is malchus, which brings everything into existence. Okay, that's the skinny on what we've said before. With Yuvan, and with this we'll understand, he has mitzvahs b'malchus. Why the mitzvahs are in malchus, which is the second hay, the hay shel Shem Havaya. Mitzvahs come from malchus, right? That's where God gives reality to his commandments. He gives reality to what was deep in his consciousness in the first place. Mitzvahs. And the Torah and mitzvahs go together, is Zoh, is the Midos. The Torah gives you an understanding. Chesed is kindness. Gevurah, it gives you an understanding of the machinery with which God is going to create the mitzvahs, because the mitzvahs also are divided into Chesed and Gevurah. The 248 positive are Chesed, you do them, you extend yourself out of yourself, and the 365 negative are Gevurah, which you refrain from doing. The instantiation of mitzvahs comes from the Midos, which come before that, which is the Torah. Torah gives rise to or expresses, and the written Torah, the kernel of all the mitzvahs. So these are the mitzvahs, these are Zoh, and that's the Vav of the Shem Havaya, right? If Malchus is the operational, operating of the kingship, that's the Hey. So the Vav, the 6 Midos, Vav K, right, comes right before that. The Hagam Shelamayla, and even though up above, meaning in deeper levels of God's consciousness, deeper than when he expresses the Torah and mitzvahs, they exist in a less than a kernel, right? Because a kernel even has some existence. They exist in a level which is called Arich Anpin, the long faces. This is the lower level of Keser, the proximate source, so to speak, of the embodiment of Torah and mitzvahs is in Keser. Hagam Shelamayla Arich Anpin, even though in that level, HaMitzvahs Hen Begalgalta, they're in his skull, right? Skull, which appears to me, as I said yesterday, like just knock on it, it seems to be just a bone. But there is, but that's the interface, because that's the first level before the actual brain. So they exist in the state of skull. Skull meaning they're not perceived at all. They don't have any material existence or any tangible existence whatsoever. Bilavoinius, they exist in the white part up there in the skull. Ki ha'orcha de deplukta, which is called in the language of Kabbalah, the path of division. The shari de mispalgal etadiag orchin. It's called the hairs, which divide into 613 paths of the Torah, Shebazah, as the Torah expresses these 613 through the mitzvahs. Hairs is an example. Why hairs? Because look at them, the hair comes out of the skull, right? So the hair is virtually, very little life, but it's the first sign that there is life, right? It grows. That's a function of life. On the other hand, you can cut it and there's no sensation whatsoever, because it's very, it stands on the border between something which is beyond life and something which is within life. That's the moshel of the hair. The shoresh Torah hanafke mechoch me'Elah, and the source of the Torah would say the proximate source of Torah, which is where it's going to come down. It's now in the brain, although at the concealed brain of this place called Arich Anpin. You have this place called Arich Anpin, which is a kind of Keser, and there's 2 dimensions here: the skull, which is above it, a makif to the makif, a transcendent level to the transcendent. And then it's going to flow down something, but where it really takes life and starts to have sensitivity is in the brain of the skull, the brain of Arich Anpin, the brain which is within the skull, would be better said, the brain which is within the skull. Lahainu ha-chokhmah. And where does that start? That starts in chokhmah. Chokhmah is where the sensibility, the sensation of what's coming from the nothing, from the ayin, starts to has some sensitivity. And this is the chokhmah of the time of the mitzvahs, of the reasons for the mitzvahs. El-Shehu, the choisen ha-mishapech. It's like, and this is a mashal brought many times in considers, a signet ring, which turns things around. In this case, okay, imagine a signet ring. This is the seal of the king seals things with, right? There's the signet ring. So if the signet ring is imploded, that means everything is indented in the signet ring. When you put it in the wax will create things which protrude from the wax. Vice versa also, if the signet ring is protruding, it will embed itself in the wax, and what's in the wax is the indentation. But here we're looking at it from this perspective, that there's a sort of, we're still in a sort of nothingness, right? Still in a sort of nothingness before it reaches Chokhmah. So that's indentation. And when you stick it down in the lower level, you start to get the protrusion of actuality, which begins in Chokhmah. And that's the notion that's expressed in Sefer Yetzirah, v'noitz techilasin b'soife. The beginning, which is in the skull, and the level where there's no expression whatsoever, that beginning is wedged in the end. And the end, we'll see, hu koyach ha'ense borchu, that's the power of the infinite one, blessed be he, livro yesh me'ayin, to create something from nothing. From not nothing, but it was that no thing, no thingfulness, no mitzias, no existence, but all of that, all of existence is embedded in the no existence, which is the point, the yud, and even higher of the Shem Havaya. And so that's a sort of skinny on Yesh Me'ayin. And this is, as you hopefully see, it's totally different than Ila V'Olo, cause and effect. In a cause and effect, there's a tangible cause already. There's something tangible which creates an effect. Yesh Me'ayin, there's a no thing. There's an intangibility which brings to being tangibility. Where there's a no Metzias, no existence, which brings about existence. Not like Ila V'Olo, where the effect is encompassed by the cause. And the effect is nullified in its existence to the cause. If, I did this before, if this is the cause and this is my hand, the hand gives way to the cause. The effect is bottled to the cause. Now, when that happens, when you get into that realm from no thingness to thingness, so this is separate from Elokus, and this is the way in which the emanator himself, through Yesh Me'ayin, becomes the Melech al Kol HaNifrodim, king over all the separations, all the multiplicity, Nois Techilasin B'Soifa. In the end, all the multiplicity, all the creation, has embedded in it the beginning, which is not tangible and can't be touched, but it's the driving force of everything, which is the point of view that Ein Od Milvado, there is nothing besides him. But that nothing besides him is embedded in the reality of separation, of multiplicity. And how is it drawn down? How do we draw down essence into existence? Through fulfilling the mitzvahs, upon which we've been commanded. And it says, we say Friday night, that which is the end of deed, which is the Maisa mitzvahs, was there in the beginning in God's thought. Therefore it says in Yerushalmi, Rab Shimon Shemapsik Lalulav. Rab Shimon, who was one of the Tanoim, doesn't he hold that you have to separate from learning in order to do a lulav or any other thing? Because learning is just the beginning of understanding what one needs to do. And so the halacha is that even a Talmud Chacham has to separate, even a highest Talmud Chacham, if there's a mitzvah that nobody else can do, he has to stop learning and go do the mitzvah. And then to the extent this is so important that essence, in the beginning is wedged in the end, which is the mitzvahs, is so important that the Chazal say in Gemara, anyone who learns and doesn't do, is better that his afterbirth be turned on his face. We had this expression before, and now he sheds a little light, because ki hashalya, the afterbirth, neitzora techila, is the first thing that's created. First comes the placenta, the afterbirth. And that's the first thing that's created, mehatipa, from the seminal drop. And that itself was the main thing of the child, ad mem yoim, until 40 days. Sheb'techilas Tzuras Havlad, when the actual form of the embryo started to take place, 40 days. But before that, there was something that didn't resemble an embryo at all, which is the placenta, which is the life force for that embryo. So get the muscle? Just like there is a level deeper than or preceding than, which has no shape of a creation whatsoever, that becomes the life force for the creation. The Chocha HaMitzvahs, similarly the mitzvahs, and Ikar HaTorah, the mitzvahs are the root of the Torah. That's what the Torah is for. The Shorsha, it's the root and the source. Hagam she'amitzvahs hi gufnius, even though the mitzvahs are physical, the HaTorah hi chachma, and the Torah is so-called wisdom, rak she'zeh b'chitzonius, but these mitzvahs, they are the externality. They are, no, yeah, the mitzvahs are the chitzonius, v'zeh penimius. The penimius is the Torah, right? That's we come to understand. But what's the root of the Torah? What's not so much the root, it is the root, but the purpose of the Torah is the mitzvahs, as we've said, as will be explained later. Yeah. And similarly, Mezivog Zun, now
Could
back
you,
up in,
before
yeah,
you go into tomorrow's,
yeah,
you just like encapsulate what we just learned, please?
yes, yes. The mitzvahs, which are the external things, right? They're outside. We do them outside. Their source is the deepest level of no thing. The deepest level. It's the simple way of explaining this, I think, it says, B'techila, no, and that's a different line result. To say that, mitzvahs oila b'ratzoinoi. The mitzvahs rose up in God's will. Will is keser, right? But they don't get expressed until they come down through the midos, which is the Torah, and then down to the actual halacha, which comes from the Torah. But what's that which is the lowest down here below, which is the physical mitzvah, was the first thing in his thought, which is the idea of the beginning. First thing in his thought is wedged specifically in the end, which is the mitzvahs. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah, and the Shilia
Yeah.
is the
The
Shilia.
Shliya is the first embodiment of that pathway down. It's like the placenta is going to give life to the embryo, but the placenta appears to be nothing, right? So the nothing is what's going to give rise to the something. This is called yesh me'ayin, something from nothing. But we're going to throw away the placenta, but don't throw away atzmus, which is the analog here to the placenta. Atzmus is driving everything, like the placenta drives the creation of the embryo. But atzmus is not placenta doesn't look anything like embryo. Atzmus doesn't look anything like the stuff that exists, but it's what's driving it, and it's what's embedded in it. It's the life force of it. Just like the placenta is the embodiment of the life force, which is going to give rise to the embryo.
And the embryo is the mitzvahs?
Yeah. The embryo is the mitzvahs, the beginning to take, physical form, external physical form. Not yet externalized, obviously, it's still in the womb, but the mitzvahs are now beginning to take shape, like in the Torah. They begin to take shape in the written Torah, but they really take shape until we know and it's not until we have the oral Torah where it comes out of his mouth. Remember yesterday, or Shabbos, the mouth. Malchus is the mouth. The mouth is like the delivery. The womb opens, the waters break, and there it's really instantiated. But there's a predecessor instantiation, which is the embryo. And the source of that embryo is something which bears no resemblance to the embryo at all, which is the placenta, just like the source of yesh is an ayin, which bears no resemblance to the yesh.
So the source of the placenta is the ayin.
Placenta here is a metaphor for the ayin. It's something, right? Yesh, the ayin is something. It's a dot, right? Remember it's a dot, but that dot has no edges to it, no contour. It's just a dot is something which has no physical space. That's what Euclid said. A dot is something that has no physical space. That's a point. That's the ayin. And then it begins to take shape. The energy comes the line with kav, and then you have the plane, length and width. So that's the placenta, right, which is beginning to take some shape, but it still doesn't bear any resemblance to the outcome, which is going to be the vlad, the embryo and the birth. So we're talking about a chain here. Once you get the placenta, you've got the beginning of something which can give life to something else, but it bears no resemblance to it. So in that respect, you're right. In that respect, it's a mashal for the ayin, which is something but nothing, no thing, right? But it's what's going to give dimensionality and form to the actual thing, which will be the birth, the vlad. But it's a progression. It's a yesh me'ayin is a quantum leap, right? And then there's a progression, downward, 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 until you get something that you can say, Mazel Tov, there's a birth. Ayanka.
Yeah, as a midwife, this mushal is, like, I can really understand it because the placenta nourishes the fetus.
Right.
The fetus can't live without there being the placenta first.
Right. So as he says, the placenta is the ikar havlad, it's the root of the child until 40 days. When after 40 days, you start seeing the embryo itself take embryonic form. Go ahead.
Right. And then I was thinking about how then the fetus stays connected to the source, but at birth is disconnected.
At first, it's disconnected?
It's connected all
connected
through the umbilical cord, which is
and
connected.
Go ahead.
But then it's cut at birth and we're disconnected from the source.
Right. So that part of the mushal that's not part of the mushal.
Okay.
Every mushal is only good so far. It's only a mushal, right? Right. But the part of the mushal that even that, what does he go on and say? So the mitzvahs, as you just said, the placenta was the life force that's going to bring about the embryo until 40 days. It was the ikar vlad, okay? And therefore, he says, one who learns without doing is better that his placenta had been thrown on his face, meaning that the placenta should never have gotten around to creating the embryo in the first place, because the embryo is the child that grows into a human, is the form that grows into a human, and the whole purpose of the tachlis of the human is mitzvahs. So if they're not going to do that, then what was the point of having the placenta in the first place?
Right.
Better his placenta should be turned on his face if he's not going to allow the placenta to do what the placenta is supposed to do, which is to create a human being whose limbs and organs are all modeled on 613, right? 613 positive, 248 positive, 613, 365 negative are the limbs and organs of a person. So a person has to express those limbs and organs through mitzvahs. If not, then what was the placenta for in the first place? Better it be turned over on his face. We're good? Are we good or not? Yes or no?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Okay. Okay. Top of page 262. Let's start at the bottom of the very bottom of Kuf Lamed Aleph after the period. Similarly, Mezivik Zun, now we're talking about the intimacy. This is a mashal, of course, the marital intimacy between Zoh, which is masculine, and Nukva. This is Zoh is the 6 midos, and Malchus, which is the feminine. Through that zivug, that unity, the biyah, in the lower worlds, now we're down into stuff that's a little more understandable, graspable. So similarly, from that marital relationship of the Midos with Malchus in the lower worlds, Bia, Nivru Ma'ayin Liyesh, there is created from nothing to something, Kol HaNivroyim, all the creatures, V'HaNetzurim, V'Noisrim, and all the things which are formed, V'All HaNasim, and all the deeds. You see the words? Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. The progressive worlds. We have an embryo now, 40 days after. Now there's a progressive development from Bria down to Yetzira, and then it's delivered. And that's all comes about, it all comes out from the light of the neshama, which was within these, back to the worlds, in these worlds, Shehi Elakus, which is godliness, which comes from the seminal drop, or the minds of the mother and the father. And in the state of the minds of the father, once again, there is no form, not even yet of a placenta, right? So you might say the minds of the mother and father are like the dot, right? And then it comes down the placenta, you could say, is like the line. In other words, something is taking shape. And then you have the dimensionality of the plane, which is their actual starting to be the form of the embryo. You could look at it like that. Anyway, there's three stages from zero, right, which is the essence of everything, no thing, zero, to a line, which comes out from that, but just linear, not yet having any dimension until, this is all from the Rebbe Shah, right? Point, line, and area, until you have an area, and now you've got something, now you've got the embryo starting to take a shape in the world of Atziya. So all of this progression comes through the light of the neshama, Shebesoichen, which within it, in the light of the neshama, that's the kav, the light beam, is godliness. Godliness from hakelim de yud spheres de malchus de atzilus. And that shape that it takes on, the vessels take shape from the 10 spheres of malchus of atzilus, because malchus is already a world. But it's a world, right? It has form. But it's so rarefied that it still has a deep, deep intrinsic sense of its connection to the power which brought it into existence in the first place. And within that, so now look, we're in Malchus, we went up from Asiya, Yetzira, Bria, Atzilus, right, worlds. Now, Malchus has a sense of from where it came, right? The expression that the Alter Rebbe uses, or the Hasidus uses about Atzilus, it's a world, but it's a yesh ha-netzo. It's an emanated world, meaning it's like a light beam that's always connected to its source and feels its connection to its source, versus Bria, which is called the yesh ha-nivra, the created being, where separation takes place, the sense of separation takes place. So up in Atzilus, that connection that it has is the connection to the kav, to the beam which came from the point. From the essence comes the beam, and Malchus has a sense that within it is the ha'oris of the kav, of the or ein sof, of the infinite light, hamalubish b'Atzilus, which is enclosed in Atzilus, ad haparsa, until the curtain between Atzilus and Bria. The ha'oris hakav, until the curtain, and the light of the kav, right, the beam, which is from the light of the kalim of the yud spheres of Malchus, that light baka a parsa, breaks through the parsa. Infinity is now breaking through into finity, breaking through the curtain. Imahem, and it comes with the kalim, which are now a metaphor for substantial, something that can hold something, right? The light by itself, or in my metaphor, the electricity without the wire is not going to be containable, not going to be useful. So with these kalim, the light of before the kav, before any kind of instantiation whatsoever, that yud goes into the line, and it carries, the yud is carried with it. In other words, essence is carried along the kav, and the essence along the kav then gives forth to an area, which is something that can really hold something. So that's what he says, that the yud sefiros of Malchus, baka ha-parsa, break through the parsa with the kalim, umer behem b'biyah, and shine with them in the lower worlds. So this is Ein Sof, carried through and manifested in the lower worlds. And maybe Atzilus Mamish, the way that Ein Sof is manifest in Atzilus itself. V'chein gam hakav be'atzmai, and also the kav in itself, hamalubish b'stiyim soif nehi, as the kav now gets expanded and comes into the midos of netzach choid yisoid, the adam kadma of the supernal man, which is before Atzilus, shehu soif ragle hayoisher, which is called in the language of Kabbalah the end of the straight feet. This is Malchus of Ein Sof, Malchus before Atzilus. Again, just think about it in terms of a rare, very rarefied state where there's nothing tangible, and then a more tangible state, and then a more tangible, until the tangibility begins to obscure the Ein Sof, which is within everything. So these are this metaphor, the feet of the straight line. The feet of the straight line. The feet is always Malchus, the bottom, but it's the straight line. It's just the kav which exists before Atzilus. Shalai hamistayim b'malchus de'atzia, and all of that goes down and down and down until it reaches the bottom in Malchus of Asiya, Malchus of this world. In ha'oras hakav me'ira mishams, but the light of the kav is still shining through. It's much thicker. It's much more opaque. We can't see the light within the thickness, but it's there because otherwise there's no life. In fact, otherwise there's nothing in existence. If the Ein Sof itself, if the infinite one himself weren't mechayed, everything has to have a nakuda of a point of elokus within it in order to have any being, in order to have any existence. Even down here in this world, there's still a ha'ora of the kav, a radiation of the kav, me'ir misham, shines from there, from the highest levels, umislabish be'or haneshama, and is enclosed in the light of the neshama of the yud spheros, of the 10 spheros, from Atzilus down to Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, shehu elakus, the spark. Now we're getting down to earth, down to things that we've talked about many times before. The godly soul itself is a container for something infinite. This soul, the soul is it's a created entity, right? It's a soul. It's not something else. But this soul contains Atzmus itself in it. We're a chelek elek hamimau. We're a part of God Himself, and that's what's contained in the godly soul. And this godly soul brings that light as the soul comes down into a body, right, lower and lower throughout the soul, traveling now through these supernal worlds, spiritual worlds. It's bringing down with it and gets enclosed within it the ruach, right? Neshama is the higher level, and then gets enclosed the ruach of the yud spheros of the 10 spheros of the lower worlds. The Afghan and even so, the kol hakelim shelahem, in all the vessels that are in coming down through all the worlds, the ha'ora, array of array, who bechol hanevroyim, is in every created thing, and in every noitrim, bria, in every formed thing, and every made thing. Again, the three worlds, bria, yetzirah, asiya. As is written, hayayimim v'chol asher bahem. It's a pasuk. The sea. It's a pasuk in Nehemiah. It says the seas, the hayomim, the seas, and everything which is within them. Meaning, everything substantial, physical, contains within it the primordial point of essence. The ato, and it says the ato mechayes kulam. You yourself, you who have no name. You who are God, who has before any name, before any Yud Chachma, Hey Bina, Vav Midos, Hey Malchus, those, with the way we interpret, one way of interpreting the Shem Havaya, before any of those names, even the name Havaya, You, yourself, essence, is enclosed within everything. And this all comes as a result of this point, the spreading out, the point becoming a line, and the line becoming an area. That's the spreading out of the highest, the hachiyasim, to enliven everything. But the existence and the essence of the Or Ein Sof, Ein de Begeda Mokim Klau. Now here is a interesting. It's air everywhere, but it's not bounded by anything because it's still Ein Sof. The Soivi Kolomim, so that's what we call Soivi Kolomim. It's everywhere present, but not bounded by anything because it's Ein Sof, but it's there and it's Soiviv everything in all worlds, but Shava equally. As it says, the heavens and the earth I fill, not just an effusion of me, but I myself, essence of God, is everywhere. In equality everywhere. Beth, your hand is up.
So that, are you saying that the infinite and finite are one at that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Exactly. Right.
Okay.
Yep. Exactly. And this is what the Zohar says. There is no place which is free of him. To use what you said, the most finite of the finite, the most minuscule of the minuscule, the most separate of the separate, cannot be free of him, because if it were free of him, it would have no existence whatsoever. Even in this physical world, Hagashmias, this is true, that the essence of Hashem is there in everything, even in this physical world. So we anticipated your question. But we don't see it, we don't feel it, because it's makif. It's, the word they use is transcendent. And that's one of the functions of Or HaSoiv. One of the definitional terms used to define Or HaSoiv is that it's hidden, it's concealed. It can't be revealed, because this is finite, and this is really even beyond infinite. This is like the point before it even becomes the line. The point of no existence is informing every existence. The point of no existence informs and is drenched through every existence in a manner of maki v'soiv, transcendent and all-encompassing. As this has been explained earlier in Likutei Amorim, particularly in Shar Yichud V'Amun. And this is not bringing them into being from ayin to yesh. You know, the ayin to yesh, from yesh to ayin, is way up high, right? Beginning with the instantiation of Atzilus. And then down and down and down, it's a ilava olo, cause and effect, right? So it's not coming in a way of spreading out an enclosement in the manner of yesh me'ayin. It's now in Seder HaHistalshelus. Array of array of array, derivative. That's Seder HaHistalshelus. One thing is a cause to another, and that one thing is a cause to another, to an effect, and that effect becomes a cause to another effect, all the way down the chain. And all of this comes from up above, from the first so-called instantiation of something, which is the beam, the first narrowness, right? This is the phenomenon of the Tzimtzum Harishon. First, there was only him, nothing else. And it's still that way, by the way, right? But there was no sense at all of anything. There was nothing. And then the Mashal, as the Rizal describes it, he took that allness and he put himself aside, and he diminished himself. And in that diminishment is the point, is the end, the beginning is the beginning of where the point becomes a line. And that's called the kav, right? So that's a day ha'ora. So anything else that's coming from that is a derivative ray of a ray of a ray of a ray, all the way back to the initial kav, the initial emergence of the beam. And this is the light of Soivev, the transcendent light, the all-encompassing light, which encompasses all four worlds, Atzilus, Yitzir, B'Yah, equally. And in them, and this is the key point, in them, in all the worlds, no matter how low, and this is the lowest of all, physical, shines the light of the Kav. Meir el Kav, there shines to the beam, Apanemius, the innermost part of the beam, is the point of origin. And that shines through them. Point of origin shines through them. How does it shine? How does it, again, electricity needs a wire to shine. The wire is the kalim. The kalim deliver the manifestation of the light. This is derech ha-kalim, of the yud spheres of the lower worlds. And in the ha'ora, in the ray of godliness which shines in the lower world, even down in this lower world, toicha kalim, within the kalim, noisin behem koyach va'oiz, there is a power that's given into them, livra yesh me'ayin, to create something from nothing. The power which creates something from nothing is embodied in the kalim of all the worlds, including, of course, this world, which in a certain sense is the most manifestation of this because of the principle that the beginning is wedged specifically in the end. And this is God's will. What he wanted in his brain before there was any formation of any how to do it was he wanted the mitzvahs being done in this physical world. All the rest that we've been talking about, we could forget about it all. It's just a pathway to get what he wanted in the first place, which is Olam Hazeh Hagashmi, and the mitzvahs which contain this powerful punch of ayin invested in a really physical, substantial yesh me'ayin. And since the creation is through the vessels give substantiality, reality to the creation. Therefore, so the vessels are multiple, they're myriad, they're infinite in themselves, the number of worlds that there are. We always say, Chassidus talks about 4 worlds, but there are many, many more worlds. 4 is very like big categories of an innumerable number of worlds within each world. And within them are the creations, bebechinas riboy, multiplicity, behischalkus, and division, ugavul, and boundedness, tachlis, and end, ubefrat, and specifically these kalim. What are the vessels which are instantiations of all this multiplicity? These are the letters with which the holy letters with which God created everything. The letters are vessels, right? The letters contain light, as we talk about a lot on Hanukkah, right? The Hanukkah lights, they can listen to the lights. The Rebbe always said, listen to the lights of Hanukkah. They contain a message. And every letter contains a message. And, we've done this not we, but Alter Rebbe has done this in the Tanya. He's shown us this. Yud. Yud is the seminal drop. Hey, the letter Hey has a meaning. It's the first expansion. Vav is the first the descent. And then you have the final Hey. And that's today's Tanya and Yom Kippur. The infinite contained in the finite, and not only the beginning of everything, God himself, Atzmus, essence, contained specifically in the physical. The end is wedged, the beginning is wedged in the end. In the point is Yom Kippur, Achas B'Shona. Achas B'Shona, the one day of the year, the singularity in time. Achas B'Shona, the singularity in time. Okay? Okay. We'll see you after Yom Kippur.
See you after Yom Kippur. Thank you.
Have an easy fast.
Thank you.
See you, Tanya.